Well, howdy, and thanks for having me. It's fun to speak in high schools. I normally speak in colleges. It's a rarity I get to speak in high schools. It's also a rarity that public high schools allow me to speak there because typically teachers want a monopoly on what they're allowed to say in the classroom, and typically that represents one particular point of view in the classroom. So it's always fun to sort of present the other point of view. And I'm going to speak for a while, and then I'm happy to take any questions you may have, especially from you Bernie Sanders supporters. I hear there are quite a few of you. Don't worry. Eventually, you'll end up paying taxes and get a life. Disagreement. It can be fun. All right. So I want to talk a little bit. I know. Don't worry. You can riot later. I want to start by talking about some of the differences between the left point of view in America and the right point of view in America. And these are very serious differences. These are fundamental differences. It used to be that in the country there was basically one vision of what everybody wanted, and it was just a question of how to get there. Everybody wanted prosperity, everybody wanted a solid family life, everybody wanted a basic standard of material wealth, and everybody wanted a stronger America abroad. That seems to have gone by the wayside. There are two very different visions of the universe that are now represented in our political debate. There's one on the left and there's one on the right. And the one on the left is represented, and I think Bernie Sanders is an excellent representative for the American left. I know that wasn't meant as a compliment, but you can cheer if you want. Bernie Sanders is a good representative of the left because Bernie Sanders actually says what most leftists think, as opposed to somebody like Hillary Clinton, who tends to lie about what leftists think because she wants to be perceived as more moderate for a general election crowd. Bernie Sanders is at least honest enough to say what it is that he believes and what most of the American left believes at this point. And I think that actually Bernie Sanders has done a pretty significant service to the American public debate by speaking out in a way that most people in politics are too dishonest to do. So I want to talk about what exactly Bernie Sanders and some folks on the left think, not just in terms of their specific policies, because we all know they want higher taxes and more redistribution of wealth, but what does that represent in terms of actual values, in terms of actual ethics? There are basically four principles that characterize what it means to be somebody on the left in America and in Europe today, and then there are four principles as to what it means to be on the right. And we can discuss whether you think this is accurate or not, but this is my perception of it. And I think that folks on the left would largely agree with this. The first principle that the left represents, the first principle the left stands for is the idea that equal outcome is the only value. Not equal opportunity, equal outcome. The idea being that if you have two people in a room and one person has $10 in their pocket and one person has $2 in their pocket, then obviously something has gone madly wrong. Right? There's been some sort of inequality that has existed, structural inequality, there's been exploitation, there's been victimization. It can't be that the guy who's got $10 in his pocket worked hard for the $10, and the guy with $2 in his pocket didn't provide market services worth $2. Right? It isn't possible that people were differently situated at the beginning, and that the guy with the $10 has never met the guy with the $2. It must be the guy with the $10 must have done something. The system must have been corrupt in some way to allow there to be this vast imbalance. This is why you hear so much on the left about income inequality. And you don't hear a lot about just poor people and how do we help poor people. You hear about income inequality, as though there's something inherently wrong with the idea that some people are rich and some people don't earn as much money. Now the fact is, in all of human existence, there's been income inequality because some people have a better skill set, some people work harder, some people have a skill set and a set of services that they provide that more people want to purchase. Bill Gates provides more to people than the local permanently poor person. He has provided a number of services that people want to purchase. He's engaged in more voluntary transactions. For the left, this isn't a representation of equal opportunity being used differently. This is actually a representation of inequality and unfairness. The left equates inequality with inequity. Right? Inequity means unfairness. Inequality just recognizes a reality, which that everybody is unequal. We all have equal rights. We all have equal access to those rights, but not everybody is equal. Some people are smart. Some people are stupid. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are great at basketball, some people are 5'9" Orthodox Jews who can't jump. Right? There's a lot of inequalities in life. That doesn't mean some inequity has taken place. It is not inequity for the NBA to be largely black. It is not inequity for the NBA to be largely tall. It is not an inequity for the NBA to be largely athletically skilled people. That is the standard for being in the NBA. And it's not inequity for people who are smarter to earn more money if they provide more services to other people and they're not exploiting anybody. But the left believes that just because there are these inequalities, those inequalities have to be rectified by the great God of government. We all have to bow down before the great collective, and don't worry, if one person is poor and one person is rich, all that has to happen is Barack Obama or Bernie Sanders or some other politician comes down from the sky and simply rectifies that imbalance by taking money from one group and giving it to another group. And this has pretty significant ramifications, because the truth is, even folks like Bernie Sanders won't actually say when inequality has been wiped away. Right? If you ask Bernie Sanders, okay, so at what point is there enough income equality that we're okay, he won't tell you. Right? Because the fact is that any sort of inequality is inequality. Unless you're going to go full communist, which even Bernie Sanders isn't willing to do, and say that everybody ought to earn exactly the same amount of money, regardless of the amount of work they put in, inequality will exist. And there was inequality even in places like the Soviet Union. So the fact is that this principle, equal outcome is the only value, it's very troubling, and it also means that we end up siding with some of the world's worst people. Because the fact is that life tends to create a relationship between cause and effect. What you do in your life is going to have consequences. Right? What you choose to do for a career, the choices that you make now, those are going to have consequences. What you do in college, that will have consequences. And those consequences are a natural result. So responsible decisions tend to end with better results than irresponsible decisions. Now, for a lot of folks, they tend to think that you sort of luck into poverty or you luck into wealth. That may be true in rare circumstances, but as a general matter, it is absolutely untrue. If you don't, especially in America, where there actually is tremendous income mobility, people move up and down the income ladder extraordinarily regularly in the United States. Most of the people who are in the top 1% weren't in the top 1% 10 years ago and won't be in the top 1% 10 years from now. There's tremendous income and mobility in the United States. But the fact is that if you believe that there's cause and effect to human action, then you have to believe that inequality is going to exist as a ramification of the fact that if you do certain things, you will be better off, and if you do certain things, you will be worse off. For example, if you don't want to be permanently poor in America, according to the Brookings Institute, if you don't want to be permanently poor, all you have to do is 3 things, and it's good advice for people of your age, okay? Graduate high school, don't have a baby before you get married, and get a job. That's it. You do those 3 things, you will not be permanently poor in the United States. It's from the Brookings Institute, which is a leftist institution. Cause and effect. But for the left, because they believe equal outcome is the only thing that matters, you should be able to do whatever you want. You should be able to have 10 kids out of wedlock, not graduate high school, and never get a job, and earn the same amount of money as Bill Gates. Because otherwise it's unfair. We have to wipe away all cause and effect relationship in order to achieve this. And what that means is that people who make bad decisions end up being benefited. And this is true both domestically and in terms of foreign policy. Because the truth is that on a foreign policy scale, internationally, countries that are poorer tend to be countries that make really bad decisions about human life. They tend to be countries that don't believe in property rights, don't believe in equal rights, don't believe in liberty. And so those countries tend to be very poor. And that is natural, and that is good, because it incentivizes people to actually pursue liberty, and to pursue decency, and to pursue equal rights. If you wipe away the relationship between cause and effect, you invariably end up siding with the world's worst people. So principle 1 for the left is equal outcome is the only value, not equal opportunity. Whenever President Obama or any other person on the left says what they want is a fair playing field, that's not true. What they want is a fair medal stand. Right? They want everybody on the medal stand at the end of the day, and it doesn't matter if you stink at the game. Principle number 2 for the left is that group justice is more important than individual justice. This is what you keep hearing, I'm sure, from some of your teachers about social justice. Social justice is garbage and crap. Social justice is a bunch of nonsense. And the reason I say this is because social justice inherently, the term social justice means not individual justice. In other words, what you do personally doesn't matter if you are part of a group. If you're part of a bigger group, your group identity trumps who you are as an individual. Right? There must be social justice. So the fact that in the United States, black people have been put upon in the United States, and there's been a tremendous and undeniable history of racism in the United States, that means that an individual black person has to be treated differently than an individual white person under the dictates of social justice. This is nonsense, and in fact it's racism. Because the fact is individuals should be treated as individuals regardless of race. As soon as you start saying that people ought to be treated by group as opposed to by individual status, you end up in the realm of injustice. The fact is that anytime you end up with a situation where you say that somebody ought to pay the price for what their group has done, you've got a problem on your hands. And this is true whether you're talking about Donald Trump and Muslim immigration, or whether you're talking about what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri. As soon as you insist that some people not be punished for their actions because they are of a certain race, or that certain people be punished more harshly because they are of a certain race, you have entered the realm of injustice. Social justice insists on this. Social justice insists that because we have to make the playing field, not the playing field, make the metal stand even, that means that if you're a member of a group that doesn't have a great history of earning, then that means that one group that does have a better history of earning has to be their money has to be taken away from them and handed to a different group. Because it's easier to achieve equality on a group level than it is on an individual level. So people tend to think in terms of groups on the left. And this is really dangerous, and it's really horrible. And it ends with more racism, not less, which is what we've seen. The third principle for the left is that in pursuit of equality of outcome, in the pursuit of that, truth is actually a secondary value. Truth doesn't matter as much as the narrative. Because fairness is all that morality is. It's the entirety of morality. All of morality is fairness. It's what's fair. Something's either fair or it's not fair according to the left. Therefore, truth doesn't matter. Because if the truth makes things unfair, then you've got a problem. So, for example, let's give a real-world example. Officer Darren Wilson and Michael Brown is a controversial example. It really shouldn't be. Okay, everybody remembers the Michael Brown case from Ferguson, Missouri. This, of course, was made into a massive national issue after there were riots in Ferguson, Missouri, after the shooting of Michael Brown by a white officer. Michael Brown was an 18-year-old black guy, and Officer Darren Wilson was a white cop. And Officer Darren Wilson shot Michael Brown, right? And what people did is, because it was important to point out for a lot of people on the left that black people have been put upon by law enforcement, they decided that the truth of the circumstance surrounding Michael Brown no longer mattered. It just had to be a racial killing. It didn't matter whether the evidence was there that there was a racial killing. It had to be a racial killing, no matter what. And it turns out the evidence wasn't there that it was a racial killing. It turns out that Michael Brown was a thug who strong-armed robbed a store and then proceeded to punch a cop, tried to grab his gun. The gun went off in the car. He ran away from the car, turned around by black witness testimony, charged the cop, and the cop shot him to death. Right? That's what happened according to Eric Holder's Department of Justice. Right? This is Eric Holder. Okay? The Obama administration was fully in on the narrative that there is racial injustice in the country, but even Eric Holder's Department of Justice had to come to the conclusion that the facts did not support the hands up, don't shoot narrative that everybody was spoon-fed. But for the left, that didn't matter. You still had folks in the media and on CNN putting up their hands and saying, hands up, don't shoot. Because it was too important. It was simply too important to push the fairness narrative as opposed to the facts narrative. Instead of judging the case on its individual merits, we did it in terms of social justice. Right? Wouldn't it be more just if we just pretended that it was a white cop who shot a black guy for no reason? Because after all, we need to go after white cops. It's important to recognize the history of racism, so this particular fact pattern doesn't matter. We'll just put it completely aside. And we see this all the time. We have to fight inequality in every way on the left, and that means that we have to tell lies. Lies like women are systematically paid less than men. They aren't systematically paid less than men. This is a lie. In the major cities all around the United States, according to Time magazine, women are paid significantly more than men if they have the same educational level, same number of years in the workforce, and the same marital status. Okay, the fact is, the reason that women are paid less than men overall is because women work less hours, take less risky jobs, and have children and take time out from the workforce. Okay, that is the fact. It is borne out by Department of Labor statistics. And this is what I mean when you hear the hisses and when you see the shaking heads. What I mean, and it's important to point this out, is that the narrative is more important to people than the truth. The truth is dangerous. The truth is troublesome. Because the truth suggests that people make choices and there are ramifications for those choices. There's law on the books, federal and state, that prohibits discrimination against women in employment. And by the way, for people who don't understand capitalism, if you truly believe, okay, as a capitalist, if you truly believe that women are available for hire at 77 cents on the dollar, only women would be working. Those evil, greedy capitalists would do nothing but hire women all day long, because they're evil and greedy and can pay women less. Okay, the reason that women are paid less, again, as a general matter than men, is because women work less hours, less years in the workforce, pick different jobs. And I know that, believe me, my wife is in medical school, right? She's about to graduate from UCLA Medical School, a very high-achieving woman. And my wife took a year off when we had our child, and that was her choice. Okay, she wanted to take a year off when she had a baby, because she wanted to spend time with the baby. I took 4 days off when we had the baby. Okay, that is not atypical. Okay, that is usually the relationship between men and women. When it comes to women having kids, women take time off in the workforce. This is just a fact of life. And you know, the group of people who would penalize my wife for that or say she was doing something wrong, it's amazing. Folks on the left in the feminist movement will get all over my wife for taking a year off from medical school, even though she is a strong, independent woman making her own choice. But as long as she's not making the choice the feminists like, then she's a problem. So the fact is that, again, narrative is trumped by truth when it comes to the left. And this is true across the board. Again, it's true with regard to everything from same-sex marriage to transgenderism. The biological facts when it comes to transgenderism don't matter. We have to pretend, because it is important to recognize that men and women don't really exist. It's all just a function of gender deconstruction and societal constructs. Again, we can have arguments over these things, but facts do matter, unless the narrative trumps them, and we keep seeing the narrative trump them. Finally, fourth principle for the left is that in order to achieve a fairer world, if you have to use force at times, then you have to use force at times. Force is okay, forced redistribution is okay, so long as you are doing it to achieve fairness. And so it doesn't really matter if the government compels people to buy Obamacare in violation of the Constitution. All that matters, truly, is that what they are doing is fair and better and makes for a better world. It doesn't matter if the Christian baker down the road doesn't want to violate his own religion and cater a gay wedding. We have to force him, because it makes for a fairer world if we use government compulsion, if we use government force. So for all the folks who are into the unearned moral superiority of the left, I think that it's important for you to ask the question. People on the left are fond of saying people on the right are the real fascists. Well, people on the right are not in favor of big government as a general rule. And they're not the ones who are trying to force you to do things. It is folks on the left who are trying to force people on the right to do things in violation of their religion and their principles. Choice has to be suppressed in pursuit of fairness. Again, all of this springs from that first principle. Fairness matters more than equality of opportunity. And that really is the central principle. All of this other stuff is just, these are all corollaries to that fundamental principle. Fairness of outcome matters. And whatever has to be done in order to achieve that fairness of outcome must be done. And as I've mentioned, because truth doesn't seem to matter so much when it comes to the leftist narrative, this is why when you get to college, you may be experiencing it already in high school, it's starting to bleed down now. There are a lot of folks who are very concerned these days about microaggressions and trigger warnings. And I don't know how many of you have heard these terms. If you haven't, you will shortly when you get to college and you meet all the numbskulls who are currently talking about them on college campuses. But the idea of a microaggression is the idea that if somebody says something you don't like, if somebody says a fact or an argument or an opinion you don't like, that this is some sort of aggression against you. We used to call this free speech, now we call it a microaggression, because after all, it's aggressive toward your narrative. And unfortunately, it's been used to justify violence, it's been used to justify people actually taking measures that are tyrannical against people on free and open campuses, and it's deeply problematic. That's a corollary of the force movement. The force movement on the left suggests that if we disagree, I have somehow aggressed you. If we disagree, it's not that we disagree, it's that I've done something aggressive to you, and just like in normal life, if I were to punch you, you'd get to punch me back. If I say something to you, the idea goes, you now get to punch me. So these are the four principles of the left. Okay, the four principles of the left: equality is the only thing that matters. The truth is not a significant ramification, it's not a significant goal to pursue if fairness is the only thing that matters. That group justice is more important than individual justice, because we can't achieve individual justice, we can only achieve group justice. And that force in the pursuit of all this is actually not just okay, it's actually praiseworthy from time to time. Right? This is why Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden, says that it's patriotic for the government to force people to turn over their money in violation of basic rights. Okay, so what are the principles of conservatism on the other side? So the principle of conservatism on the other side, the chief one, is that fairness of opportunity matters. Okay, fairness of opportunity matters more than fairness of outcome. That we can't cure all the problems in the world. It turns out that there are just too many problems in the world for government to cure it. Government is not God. And thus, because government is not God, fairness of outcome is not guaranteed. In fact, fairness of outcome shouldn't even be sought, because the fact is, because you're not God, you don't get to dictate to people like you are God. And what that means, and this is based on two fundamentally different conceptions of what human beings are. According to the left, human beings are basically widgets that we can grind down into equality of outcome. According to folks on the right, people are inherently flawed, but we're also capable of great good. That if we just get rid of the capitalist system like Bernie Sanders wants, we won't magically transform into wonderful, decent, and humane people. We'll be all the same that we were before. The only difference is some of us will have massive power over others. Right? That is the idea. And so because we're all capable of sin, because we're all capable of doing bad things, we can't put power in one place. The idea of an overarching government that is powerful and imposes things on us is deeply disturbing because people are inherently problematic. We're capable of good, we're capable of bad. That means we have to have checks and balances. And those checks and balances have to also protect these rights that come from God or nature, whatever you want to call it. They come from, and they adhere to the individual. They don't adhere to groups, they adhere to you. Every person in this room has rights as an individual that have nothing to do with your status in a group, regardless of your race, regardless of your religion, regardless of your ethnicity. The only thing that matters is the rights that accrue to you as an individual. And because those rights accrue to you as an individual, nobody gets to violate those rights, whether it's the government or whether it's another individual. Those rights are inviolable. And so the idea that those rights will be violated in the name of achieving a fair outcome is actually anathema to conservatism. Because what you consider fair, it turns out somebody else doesn't consider fair. I don't consider it fair that, yes, I earn a really good living, and then I spend a lot of my money taking care of my child. I don't think it's fair that my money should be taken away from me and given to somebody who's chosen to make different life decisions. It is not my job to pay for somebody else's child. It is my job to pay for my own child, and it is your job to pay for your child, and it's your parents' job to take care of you. When you get rid of basic standards of personal responsibility, what you end up doing is grinding down the people who make responsible decisions in favor of people who make irresponsible decisions. So the 4 principles on the right are, number 1, people are capable of good and people are capable of bad. Number 2, individuals have rights that accrue to them as individuals, not just as member of groups. Number 3 is that there are consequences to individual actions, and that you have to first look to the individual actions before you simply shout discrimination or exploitation. Yes, discrimination exists. Yes, exploitation exists. But let's actually identify the people who are discriminating and exploiting and target them for violation of law instead of just declaring that it's out there in the universe and we're all being crushed by it, because that helps nobody. It helps nobody to go ghost hunting. And we just say discrimination exists. America's institutionally racist. That is a completely worthless statement. It helps no one. Name the racist, find the racist, we'll all side together. There is no one in America who sided with Dylan Stormroof, or at least very few people, the guy who shot up the church in Charleston, South Carolina. There's nobody in America, for that matter, who sided with the cop who shot Walter Scott in South Carolina, the black guy who was shot from behind by a cop. Everybody came out and said, this is a case of what appears to at least be racism, and the guy's probably going to end up in jail for the rest of his life, as he should. Okay, point out individual circumstances in which unfairness is occurring so that we can determine whether it is due to people doing things wrong or whether it is just due to the nature of things in which people are differently skilled. And this is the beautiful thing about capitalism, folks. It turns out that even people who are differently skilled, not everybody has to be a doctor. In fact, if everybody were a doctor, no doctors would get paid anything. It turns out that people with varying skill sets can make lots of money doing varying different things. You don't have to have a high IQ to make a lot of money in America. You don't have to have a wonderful educational background in order to do well in America. All you really have to do is work hard and keep your nose to the grindstone, and you will do well in America. And I know that there are folks who shake their head at this idea. Well, those folks who shake their head at this idea should try living in another country where you can't do that. Because the fact is, again, income mobility in America remains extraordinarily high. The only obstacle that you are really going to have in your own life, outside of those individuals who we should all target and we should all bring forward for prosecution if they break the law, the real obstacle to you doing what you want is you. The real obstacle is work harder. Okay, it turns out everybody has obstacles and problems in their life. The way to get over it is not to whine about it, it's not to whine about society, it's not to blame it on some shadowy force beyond your control. The idea is that you need to go out there and you need to fight for what's yours in this universe, and that means standing up for your own agency, standing up for your own ability to do things that are positive and beneficial for yourself and for your community. The final principle for the right is that the real purpose of government is not to achieve fairness, it is not to achieve equality of outcome. The purpose of government is to protect those rights that you already have as an individual. Rights do not come from government. Rights do not come from government, because the same government that has the ability to give you rights is the same government that can take them away in a split second. Any government powerful enough to force you to buy Obamacare is a government that's powerful enough to force you to do pretty much anything it feels like doing today. You have rights as an individual, and nobody, not the person next to you, and certainly not a massive government bureaucracy with $4 trillion at its behest, has the moral capacity to violate your individual rights. And anybody who says they do is siding with evil. And that's the difference between the two sides. So in essence, it comes down to this. Do you believe in fairness of opportunity, or do you believe in fairness of outcome? Do you believe that individuals have responsibility for their own actions, or do you believe that shadowy forces beyond your control, that you can't even describe, name, or fight, are determining everything in your life? Are you so quasi-religious in your view of the universe that you believe that some chaotic universe is making you its victim, or do you have the ability to rise above your circumstance and do something valuable for yourself? That's really what this is about. And if you believe that you have agency, if you believe that you have individual power, if you believe that you can make something of yourself, then you need to stand up against anybody who says that they have the right to take something away from you for some vague idea they have in their head of what an equal universe ought to look like. Thanks so much. Happy to take questions. Well, to be self-evident why the NBA is different than real life. But the reason that the NBA is different than real life is because the consumers of the NBA are paying to watch a competition. If the competition is not good, people will not come to the games. The reason there's a revenue-sharing league is that there is a relatively equal distribution of talent so as to ensure the quality of the games. People who are living in American society are not paying for the thrill of competition. Consumers who live in American society and power the economy are doing so for a good product. Okay, the NBA provides a good product in the way that they choose to do in their private sphere. The way that Bill Gates provides a good product is not by redistributing his income to Apple. The way that Bill Gates provides a good product is by competing in an open market with Apple and reinvesting in his own team. Okay, the idea, again, when capitalism comes to, and really free market economics comes down to what does the consumer want. The reason the NBA redistributes wealth is not because Donald Sterling was not a good guy. It wasn't because Donald Sterling decided, you know what would be awesome? I feel like giving away half my wealth now to other teams. Okay, the reason that Donald Sterling practiced in that way is, again, because consumers demanded that there be a competitive balance on the field. And so you have to artificially create that competitive balance in order to please consumers. So the NBA is not a good model, because the consumers of the NBA are looking for an entertaining, competitive game, and consumers in American life are looking for a better product. They're not looking for two crappy iPhones competing with each other, they're looking for the best iPhone.
So wouldn't you concede that it's possibly better to redistribute wealth then so that others are able to rise up, join the middle class, procure a better education so that they're a better workforce that can compete on a global scale?
Redistribution of wealth does not achieve competition. Because it turns out that what actually achieves competition is the sort of values that you impose in your work life. This is why if you have a bunch of people who win the lottery, disproportionately people who are poor and win the lottery end up poor again. The reason people are permanently poor in the United States is not because they don't have money, it's because they suck with money. The reason people are temporarily poor is because they don't have money. The reason they're permanently poor, okay, this is self-evident, folks, that's not even controversial. If you're poor in America your entire life, you are not great with money by definition. Okay, if you are, name me one person in America who's phenomenal with money, but is poor for 80 years in the United States. Anybody? Names? Anyone? Okay, military veterans. Okay, military. Okay.
Test. I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah,
Shapiro.
happy to take another
I'm at a point right now, quite frankly, where I'm going to dismiss the students. I know there are other questions that would like to be asked.
Why?
With all due respect, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Shapiro represents a narrative that he's providing to all of you guys based off of his opinions, what he believes, and what he wants to share with all of you. I know that the education was there for all of you to understand left side, right side, whatnot, but also the opportunity was allowed for him to impress upon you some of his opinions about certain things. And I think the lesson was there for me to understand and also for all of you to understand. I think what this is getting into now is it's starting to cross the line. And
what would that line be?
Why are they crossing the line? I don't see nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong.
let me ask this
You're
question.
the one who's crossing the line.
Let me ask this question. If, for those students who would like to be dismissed, I'm allowing you to go ahead and do so at this time. For those of you who would like to continue to listen, you can remain and listen to Mr. Shapiro and also the information.
I know. I'm telling you, Mark. Let's assume.
Keep on asking questions. It's still people want to say.
I'm gonna get the mic.
Guys in the classroom with a monologue on politics without the kids walking out. That'd be awesome. Since I'm not being by the state of California, I can't do that.
Yes, I was wondering about your comment. Earlier you mentioned the non-aggression principle by saying that we should not initiate force onto other people, and I was wondering, what's your opinion on the U.S.'s role in world politics?
Okay, so the non-aggression principle having to do with interpersonal relations in a civilized society is not the same thing as foreign policy. The fact is that when it comes to foreign policy, you sometimes have to detect threats to yourself before those threats materialize. You don't want to always wait until Pearl Harbor or 9/11 happens. I'm not against the notion of preemptive war, depending on the evidence that can be brought to bear to show that it's an actual threat to American citizens, because that is the fundamental job of the American government, is to protect your life and your liberty and your property. This is what government was instituted to do. And so the best way to do that is to sometimes go to war before you are hit. I mean, because then the question becomes, okay, so how badly do you have to be hit in order to go to war? Right? How many people have to die in order for you to go to war? Right? If there's a couple people who get shot in a random place, does that mean that you are now justified in going to war? Whereas if they hadn't died, you wouldn't have been justified in going to war. America's foreign policy is about our national interest, whereas interpersonal relations in a civilized society, we have common rules we've agreed to, and one of those rules is that if I don't take a physical action against you, you don't get to take a physical action against me. That's one of the rules in a civilized society. That is not the rule in foreign policy. If that were the rule in foreign policy, then unfortunately you'd have to wait for the world's worst people to kill a lot of people before you can do anything to stop them.
So you back the GOP, right?
Well, I mean, I'm a conservative. If the candidate, you know, is conservative and Republican, then sure. I mean, it depends on who the candidate is, but as a general matter, I vote Republican.
I just want to know, like, which candidate right now do you like support the most?
I mean, if I had to vote in a primary right now, I'd vote for Ted Cruz.
So my question is, do you think incentives offered for charity has more beneficial factors or negative factors?
So I assume this is an essay question that you're having me fill in for. This is a clever man right here. Okay, so incentives offered for charity, is this beneficial or not? I assume that the question is more to do with the government offering tax write-offs. Okay, so you know, the fact is that I think that religious people tend to give charity whether or not they get the tax write-off. As an Orthodox Jew, I give a certain percentage of my income to charity every year, but regardless of whether I get the tax write-off or not. I can tell you, as somebody who's worked with 501c3 organizations, nonprofits, there's no question that people give more charity if they feel like they can get a tax write-off. Of course it means people give more charity. You know, what the boundaries should be on, you know, what is allowed as a charitable organization is a controversial topic. But, of course, like anything else in life, if you create an incentive for something, you tend to get more of it. It's true for anything. It's true from everything from sexual behavior to charity. More incentives for it means you get more of it.
Mr. Shapiro? Okay.
Stand up, yeah, thank you.
Mr. Shapiro, I just wanted to ask on your personal opinion on Donald Trump's approach on Islamophobia.
So I mean, I think that Trump's new proposal to bar all Muslim immigration is idiotic. I think it's idiotic for a variety of reasons. Now, I'm not going to pretend that the threat from radical Islam is not real, and I'm not going to pretend that there shouldn't be monitoring of possible radical Islamic threats coming into the United States, as well as radical Islamic threats currently in the United States. There obviously, when it comes to immigration, I'm of the opinion that we should do significant ideological background checks on people before they enter, regardless of what their religion is. There are really a couple of reasons why Trump's proposal on Muslim immigration is foolish. First of all, yesterday, Trump had said something about how American citizens who are abroad shouldn't even be allowed to come back, which is just asinine and unconstitutional and immoral. I mean, you don't get to have your rights taken. I've said, you have individual rights. They're not taken away from you without due process of law under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. So that is stupid. He backed off of that today, and he said that he's just talking about foreign Muslims entering the United States. And the reason I think that's stupid is because I don't really care what you tend to believe religiously. I tend to care about what your political ideology is, what do you think government ought to be used for, and also, more importantly, how do you behave? How do you behave is a much more important question to me than whether you think that Jesus was born of a virgin birth, or whether Muhammad ascended from the stone in Jerusalem. Like that makes no difference to me whatsoever. The only thing that makes a difference to me is how that impacts your view of what government ought to do. So, for example, I'd ban everybody from coming in the country if you believe that the government ought to prosecute you for drawing Muhammad. Right? I think that's a pretty good reason you shouldn't be able to come in the country, because that's a basically un-American idea. Right? You should be able to say what you want without the government cracking down on you. But again, that's not a religious thing as much as it is an ideological thing. Also, by the way, his Muslim immigration proposal is highly damaging to U.S. intelligence efforts at home and abroad. You're not going to get a lot of Muslims to work with you if they think that you're going to throw them out at the first available opportunity, or that you're never going to let a Muslim into the country again, no matter how moderate that person happens to be.
Shapiro, do you agree with the notion that ISIS and Islam are synonymous?
No. ISIS and Islam are not synonymous, obviously, but is ISIS Islamic? Sure. Okay, it's asinine to contend that ISIS is not Islamic. Of course it's Islamic, it's just a branch of Islam that is quite radical in scope. Now, I'm also going to mention here that the notion that there is a only tiny minority of Muslims who are in fact radicalized is not true. I mean, if you look at polls around the world, I've done a video on this, you can see on YouTube. I go through the Pew Research polls and evaluate standards based on what percentage of populations in various countries backs terrorism or honor killing of women, what percentage backs prosecution based on Sharia law by the government, right? And it turns out that actually hundreds of millions of people believe in these things. That's not the same thing as being a terrorist, but it does mean that you believe in things that are fundamentally anti-Western. So that's problematic. So is ISIS the sole representative? No, there's no sole representative of any religion. And I'm not really concerned about the idea of, there's some people you'll hear who will get into the violent passages of the Quran, and that's not something that interests me. You can find violent passages of the Bible also, and I'm a Bible-believing Jew. But what matters to me is behavior. What matters to me is how that behavior manifests, particularly in terms of the ideology that you believe. So, is ISIS Islamic? Yes. Is it the only form of Islam? No. Or should we be concerned about radical Islam across the globe? Absolutely.
This is going to be the last question.
Dr. Shapiro, on August 28, 2003, in an article on townhall.com, in which you analyzed the rise of gay and lesbian studies in college, you said, if you pay tuition, you're sponsoring the militant homosexual agenda. If you pay taxes, you're sponsoring the militant homosexual agenda. If your child majors in English, you're sponsoring the militant homosexual agenda. Tell Bailey to major in math. So I guess my question is, earlier you were talking about grouping and how liberals do grouping.
Yes.
Would you say that this is an example of grouping and therefore you're kind of crossing the boundary into a liberal?
No, and I will explain why. When you use my taxpayer dollars for stuff I don't approve, then it's sponsoring a particular agenda. And it turns out that in the state of California, which now has a law on its books, for example, that suggests that we have to teach gay and lesbian history in schools, that is in fact an agenda. It turns out, here's the thing, that one of the things that annoys me, is the idea that people are unbiased. Everybody's biased, okay? I'm honest enough to recognize that I'm a conservative. Well, you'll hear from a lot of teachers, in this school and others, you'll hear that they're objective representatives of the truth. That isn't true. Everybody has their bias, everybody has their politics. I'm just honest enough to admit my bias in politics. When it comes to the idea that the state is sponsoring particular viewpoints, failing to recognize that the state sponsors a variety of viewpoints, including what I think is certainly accurately termed a militant homosexual agenda when it comes to the idea that you're going to teach in schools, specifically gay and lesbian history, which is now mandated by state law. Yeah, that's sponsoring an agenda. And again, the state sponsors lots of agendas. So, yeah, I'm not going to run away from something that I wrote and agree with.
What's inappropriate about saying that there are been homosexuals that have been persecuted, or that homosexual men and women have contributed positively to...
There's nothing negative in saying that homosexuals have been persecuted or that homosexuals have contributed positively, but I don't think the important thing about Leonardo da Vinci is that he liked dudes. I think the important thing about Leonardo da Vinci is his contribution to Western civilization. And I think that has very little to do with where he wanted to put his genitals.
So where does it rise to militancy then?
Where does it rise to militancy? It rises to militancy when you start grouping people based on their sexual orientation without any reference to their actual contribution to the culture. Okay, the fact is that the contributions of Leonardo da Vinci had nothing to do with his proclivity for people of the same sex. Just as, Abraham Lincoln's sexual proclivities had nothing to do with his contributions.
But we're not talking about, in California, we make mention of Stonewall, we make mention of Harvey Milk, we make mention of positive people pursuing civil rights. Okay,
first of all, again, your definition of civil rights includes, for example, same-sex marriage, which is a very hot-button political topic, still in California. Okay, the idea that that's not an agenda is, of course it's an agenda. I mean, do you acknowledge it's an agenda?
Absolutely.
So it's certainly an agenda, right? You don't think it's militant, and I do. That's all.
By the way, the notion that all educators are not our educators do not have objectivity. I'll be the first one. And my students know that I have a particular agenda.
Well, I appreciate your
However,
honesty.
I also appreciate everyone here that's willing to listen to multiple ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, and objective.
That I appreciate too.
It's highly important to listen to different ideas, even when you disagree. Mr. Shapiro and I would never agree on most things.
I appreciate you coming anyway.
But I think that everyone should form their own opinions after having listened to multiple points of view, and that we
Agreed.
should be allowed to express those, even when we disagree, and that two people can disagree in a polite, respectful manner,
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So,